I was halfway up my daughter's porch steps when her neighbor grabbed my arm. "Stop! Don't go in there. I just called 911. The police broke through the door. What I saw inside made my blood run cold. My husband Thomas lying unconscious at the bottom of the stairs, injured and unresponsive. My daughter Elena was at the top landing, pointing at her husband. He did it. Brandon hurt Papa. Before we continue, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. And let us know where in the world you're watching from in the comments. Now back to my story. My name is Christina Hood. I'm 58 years old, and 3 weeks ago I drove across San Francisco in the pouring rain because a stranger's voice on my husband's phone told me to call 911. I didn't even process the neighbor's words before the sound of sirens cut through the suburban afternoon like a knife. The man blocking my path was older, maybe 70, built like someone who'd spent time in the service. His hand was firm on my arm, keeping me on the sidewalk even as I tried to pull away. "Ma'am, you can't go in there," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I'm telling you, it's bad." My heart was hammering so hard I thought my ribs would crack. "That's my daughter's house. My husband is in there. Thomas Hood. Let me go." "The police are 30 seconds out," he insisted, his grip tightening. "Let them handle it." His name, I'd later learn, was Victor Rodriguez. He lived right next door. He was a retired Marine. He had kind eyes that were currently filled with something that looked like pity. "What did you hear?" I demanded, my voice breaking. "What did you hear?" He looked back at the house, his weathered face grim. "Started about 10 minutes ago. Loud yelling. A man's voice. Your husband, I'm guessing. Then a woman's voice, high-pitched, angry. Then a crash, heavy furniture going over, glass shattering." He paused, and I watched his jaw tighten. Then the woman screamed. Not a yell, Mrs. Hood, a scream, the kind you only hear once in your life. She was pleading, "Please stop, you're hurting him." Then he looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that made my blood run cold. Then it went dead quiet. That's when I called. Hurting him. Hurting who? Thomas. My gentle husband of 32 years, a retired high school English teacher. The thought of anyone laying a hand on him made something feral rise up in my chest. The sirens were deafening now, and I knew with every fiber of my being who was responsible. Brandon, my daughter's husband. I had never trusted that man, not from the day Elena brought him home 4 years ago. He was white, from old California money, the kind that came with a summer house in Napa and a trust fund that could buy my restaurant 3 times over. He had this permanent smirk, like he was always in on a joke the rest of us weren't sophisticated enough to understand. He worked at some boutique investment firm in the financial district, drove a Tesla that cost more than I'd paid for my first building, and always talked down to me and Thomas. He'd call me Christina instead of Mrs. Hood or Mom. He'd pat my shoulder like I was a child when I talked about the restaurant business. I'm a restaurant owner. I started as a dishwasher when I was 16, fresh off the boat from Taiwan with my parents. I worked every position in that kitchen. I burned my hands, cut my fingers, destroyed my back. I earned everything I have. I am not a child. Thomas, bless his heart, always tried to see the good in people. "He's just nervous, Christy," he'd say. "He's trying to fit in with the family. Give him time." But I knew better. I saw the way Brandon looked at Elena, like she was another acquisition, another pretty thing to add to his collection. And Elena, my vibrant, strong-willed daughter who'd graduated Berkeley with honors, who'd been so fierce, she just faded around him. She became quiet, agreeable, always looking to him for approval before she spoke. It made me sick. 3 weeks ago, Thomas had driven down here from our place in Daly City. The official reason was that Elena had a medical emergency, some kind of severe panic attacks. She needed her father. It felt wrong to me even then. Elena had sounded strange on the phone. Strained. And Thomas had been acting odd too, checking his phone constantly, his face tight with worry. "Everything's fine, Christy," he'd said when I'd pressed him. Elena just needs me right now. Let me handle this. Handle what? I'd wanted to scream. But Thomas was a private man, and after 32 years of marriage, I'd learned to trust him. Now, standing on this sidewalk with my heart trying to break through my chest, that trust felt like the most naive thing in the world. I should have come sooner. I should have trusted my gut about Brandon. That medical emergency story was garbage. This was something else. This was Brandon. 2 squad cars screeched to a halt, blocking off the street. 4 officers jumped out, hands on their weapons, faces hard and focused. "What's the situation?" a female officer barked at Victor. Victor pointed at the house. Heard a violent altercation, glass breaking, woman screaming for help, man's voice, then silence. No sound for the last 8 minutes. The officers moved up the walkway, flanking either side of the front door. One of them, a tall officer with gray at his temples, pounded on the door. "San Francisco Police Department, open the door." Silence. I pushed past Victor, ignoring his protest. My legs were moving on their own. "My husband is in there," I shouted. "Thomas Hood, my daughter." "Elena!" The female officer put her hand up, blocking my path. "Ma'am, I need you to stay back. Stay on the lawn." "That's my family." The words ripped out of me, raw and desperate. The officer at the door shouted again, "Police! Open the door now or we're coming in." Nothing. Just that terrible, heavy silence pressing down on everything. "Okay," the gray-haired officer said. "Breach it." He stepped back and slammed his boot just beside the doorknob. The wood splintered, but the deadbolt held. Again. The frame cracked. On the third kick, the door flew open, banging against the inside wall. "Clear," they yelled, disappearing inside. I couldn't wait. I didn't care what they'd said. I ran past the officer, still on the porch, Victor right behind me. "Ma'am, I told you to wait." But I was already through the doorway. The smell hit me first. Copper, metallic, blood. The house was destroyed. A tall floor lamp, the expensive one Elena had been so proud of, was shattered on the hardwood. A heavy wooden chair was on its side. Glass from what looked like a picture frame crunched under my shoes. "Thomas," I screamed. "Elena! In here!" The female officer's voice came from just past the staircase. I ran toward the sound, and then I saw him. My world didn't just stop. It evaporated. Thomas, my Thomas, was lying at the bottom of the stairs. His body was twisted at an angle that bodies shouldn't bend. His eyes were closed, his face gray. A dark pool of blood was spreading slowly across the light tile, creating a halo around his silver hair. The sound that came out of me wasn't human. It was something animal, something primal that I didn't know I could make. No, 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 no. My legs gave out. I stumbled, catching myself on the wall. This wasn't real. This was a nightmare. I was going to wake up in my own bed, and Thomas would be there beside me, warm and safe, probably reading one of his mystery novels with his reading glasses sliding down his nose. But the copper smell was too strong. The silence was too loud. "I've got a pulse," the officer suddenly yelled, her fingers pressed to Thomas's neck. "It's faint, but he's breathing. Get a bus rolling now." Breathing. The word was a hammer blow. The stone in my chest cracked open. I surged forward, my knees hitting the tile so hard pain shot up my thighs. "Thomas, baby, I'm here. I'm right here." "Ma'am, don't touch him," the officer commanded. "Paramedics are on the way. We can't move him." I knelt there, 2 feet away from my husband, completely helpless. I stared at the blood matting his beautiful silver hair. I stared at the unnatural angle of his head against the tile. This wasn't just a fall. Thomas was careful. He might miss a step, sure, but he wouldn't shatter a lamp. He wouldn't overturn a chair. This was violence. This was rage. Who? I choked out, tears finally breaking through. Who could do this? My gaze traveled up the staircase, and that's when I saw her. Elena. My daughter was crushed into the corner at the top of the landing, pressed against the wall with her knees pulled tight to her chest. Her face was buried in her hands, her entire body shaking with violent sobs. "Elena," I cried out, my voice finding power I didn't know I had left. Sweetheart, what happened? Are you hurt? She lifted her head. Her face was a grotesque mask of terror and tears. Mascara ran in thick black rivers down her cheeks, but she wasn't looking at me. She was looking past me, staring at something, or someone in the room. Then her arm shot out, her finger trembling as she pointed. Him! She screamed, the sound so raw it seemed to tear through the house itself. It was him! He did it! He pushed Papa! I followed her shaking finger. My head snapped up, and there he was. Brandon. He was just standing there at the top of the landing by the railing, staring down at the chaos below. He was still holding his cell phone in his right hand. He looked completely dazed, like someone had hit him over the head. His expensive dress shirt was torn at the collar, and his face. He attacked Papa! Elena shrieked again, her voice climbing into hysteria. I saw it. I saw everything. I saw them clearly then. Even from 15 feet below, bright, angry red scratches. 3 of them, running from his left temple down his cheek, disappearing under his jaw. Defensive wounds. My God. Thomas, my 60-year-old husband, who'd never thrown a punch in his life, had fought him. He'd fought for his life against this animal. The man I never trusted. The man I'd let into my family. Police, show me your hands, the gray-haired officer roared, his weapon now drawn and raised. He was already taking the stairs 2 at a time. Brandon didn't even seem to register him. He just stood there, his mouth opening and closing like a fish, drowning in air. The officer didn't hesitate. He slammed Brandon against the wall, face first. You have the right to remain silent. No, Brandon finally whispered. It was the first sound he'd made. No. Shut up, the officer commanded, yanking Brandon's arms behind his back. The sharp click of handcuffs echoed in the stairwell. That sound snapped me out of my shock. The ice in my veins turned to fire, a rage I hadn't felt in decades. Not since I was a teenager fighting girls twice my size who thought they could push around the immigrant kid, surged through me like electricity. You, I roared, pushing myself up from the floor. You worthless piece of garbage, you did this! I lunged for the stairs, my only thought to get my hands on him, to make him pay. But Victor was suddenly there, grabbing me in a bear hug from behind. Christina, no, he said firmly. Don't. Let the police handle this. Don't do something you'll regret. I fought against his grip, tears of pure fury blinding me. He harmed him. He harmed my husband. I didn't, Brandon started yelling, finally finding his voice as they dragged him down the stairs. He was twisting, his eyes wild, looking not at Elena but right at me. Mrs. Hood, Christina, please. It wasn't me. Check her laptop. Check Elena's laptop. His words were frantic, desperate, but Elena's screams drowned him out. Liar! She howled from the top of the stairs. You monster! You tried to harm him. The officers dragged Brandon through the foyer and out the splintered front door. Please, he yelled one last time, his voice cracking. The laptop. Just check the laptop. The door slammed shut. I was left standing in that ruined living room, my chest heaving, my body shaking. Victor still had a firm hand on my shoulder, not restraining anymore, just grounding me. Elena was sobbing uncontrollably upstairs, collapsing onto the carpet, and my Thomas, my beautiful Thomas, was still lying on that floor, so terribly still, while paramedics finally rushed in with a stretcher and equipment. Check her laptop. What kind of desperate garbage was that? The man was a cornered rat trying to bite anyone he could reach. My daughter was the victim here. My husband was the victim. And Brandon was the monster. I knew it. I'd known it from the very beginning. The fluorescent lights of the hospital waiting room hummed with that low, agonizing buzz that drills right into your skull. It had been 5 hours. 5 hours since I'd watched them wheel Thomas through those double doors, his face pale, his silver hair still matted with dried blood. The doctor, a young woman who looked barely old enough to have finished her residency, had used words I couldn't quite hold on to. Severe cranial trauma, pressure on the brain, medically induced coma. She'd spoken gently, her hand briefly touching my arm, but all I could hear was that relentless fluorescent hum. I was sitting on a hard plastic chair that felt like it had been molded from ice. Beside me, Elena was a crumpled heap of tissues and tears. She hadn't stopped crying. Her body kept shaking with these silent, devastating sobs that made her look 12 years old again. I pulled her close, wrapping my arm around her thin shoulders. "It's going to be okay, sweetheart," I whispered, though the words tasted like ashes in my mouth. "Papa's strong. He's going to be okay." "Mom," she finally whispered, her voice raw from crying. "I have to tell you something. I'm so ashamed." I held her tighter, my heart aching for her. "Baby, listen to me. This is not your fault. None of this is your fault." "But it is," she insisted, pulling back just enough to look at me with bloodshot, pleading eyes. "I let this happen. I hid it from you. I hid it from Dad." A cold finger traced down my spine. "Hid what, Elena?" She took a ragged breath, like she was drowning. "Brandon, he has a sickness, Mom. A gambling sickness." The word hung in the air between us. Gambling. And just like that, it clicked. It made terrible, perfect sense. That expensive watch I'd seen on his wrist last month when they'd come for dinner. The new car he'd claimed was just a company lease. That arrogant smirk he always wore. It wasn't confidence at all. It was the bluff of a desperate, drowning man. "I didn't know how bad it was until about 6 weeks ago," Elena continued, the words spilling out like she'd been holding them back for too long. "I found statements, online accounts. Mom, he'd lost everything. Our entire savings account, all of it, $95,000. I felt the blood drain from my face. $95,000. That was the money Thomas and I had given them 3 years ago for a down payment on the house. Money we'd saved for decades. Money that represented every double shift I'd worked, every holiday I'd spent at the restaurant instead of home, every sacrifice we'd made. Gone." "I confronted him," Elena sobbed, her body shaking. "I showed him the statements. He promised he'd stop, Mom. He swore he'd get help. He begged me not to tell you. He said he was too embarrassed to face you both. That he couldn't stand for you to think he was a failure." That made perfect sense, too, didn't it? I'd never hidden my disapproval of Brandon. Of course, he'd be terrified of me finding out. "And the medical emergency?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "The reason Dad came down here?" Elena's face crumpled, and she looked away, shame radiating off her like heat. There was no medical emergency." "What?" "I lied," she whispered, tears streaming faster now. "Mom, I was so scared. I was desperate. I didn't know what to do. The money was gone, all of it, and Brandon was acting strange, distant. I was terrified of what he'd do when he realized I'd found out, when he realized he couldn't hide it anymore. So I called Dad and made up the panic attack story because I needed him. I needed someone. I didn't know who else to turn to. So Thomas had walked into a trap. My careful, cautious husband had walked straight into a lion's den because our daughter had been too afraid to tell me the truth. "Dad, he's so smart, Mom," Elena cried, hiding her face in her hands. "He must have found the bank statements I'd hidden in my desk, the credit card notices. This afternoon, while I was upstairs taking a shower, I heard them. They were yelling. Dad was confronting Brandon about the money. I could picture it perfectly. My Thomas, not a large man, not a fighter, but with a spine of absolute steel when it came to protecting his family, standing up to that entitled boy. I ran downstairs," Elena whispered. "Dad was holding the statements. He was telling Brandon he was a thief, that he'd betrayed our trust, that he was going to call the police. And Brandon," her voice broke completely. "He just snapped, Mom. He grabbed Dad's arm. He was yelling at him to mind his own business. Dad tried to get to the phone, and Brandon, he shoved him. Hard, with both hands. Dad flew backward and hit the stairs, and he didn't get up." She dissolved into hysterical sobs, clinging to my sweater. I held her, but my body was rigid. My mind was painting the picture over and over and over. My husband lying broken on that floor. All because of him, because of that parasite I'd let into my family. I must have sat there for another hour, just stewing in my own rage, rocking my daughter while she cried herself into an exhausted silence. Then a new voice cut through the humming quiet. "Mrs. Hood." I looked up. A man in a rumpled suit stood there holding a badge. He looked like he'd seen too much of the world's ugliness and had stopped being surprised by any of it. "I'm Detective Marcus Santos," he said. "I need to ask you and your daughter a few questions about what happened today." Detective Santos had kind eyes, the dangerous kind that made you want to trust him, want to tell him everything. But there was something else in his gaze as he looked from me to Elena and back again. Something that made my stomach twist. "Your daughter gave a preliminary statement at the scene," he said, pulling out a small notebook. "I just want to clarify a few details. You both stated that your son-in-law, Brandon, pushed Mr. Hood down the stairs during an argument about money. Is that correct?" "That's exactly right," I said firmly, my arm still around Elena's trembling shoulders. "My daughter witnessed the entire thing." Detective Santos nodded slowly, like he was processing something that didn't quite add up. "The thing is, Mrs. Hood, we have a conflicting statement." My brow furrowed. "Conflicting? From who? From Brandon? Of course he's going to lie." "No, ma'am," Santos interrupted gently. "From your neighbor, Mr. Victor Rodriguez, the man who called 911. I felt Elena stiffen beside me. "What about him?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Santos flipped through his notebook. "Well, Mr. Rodriguez is a veteran. Says he's got exceptionally sharp hearing, trained in the military. He's very clear and very certain about what he heard. He says he heard the argument, yes, but he says he distinctly heard a man's voice, presumably Mr. Mitchell, shouting, 'Elena, stop,' and then, quote, 'Elena, you're hurting him.' The words hung in the air like smoke. I stared at him. That's impossible. He's confused. He must have heard it backward, or maybe, Santos said, his eyes unreadable. But there's something else, Mrs. Hood. The way he said it made ice form in my veins. We ran Mr. Mitchell's background check, standard procedure. He's completely clean, not even a parking ticket. No history of violence, no complaints, nothing. He paused, and his gaze shifted to Elena, who had gone very, very still. Your daughter, on the other hand, has a sealed juvenile record, an assault charge from when she was 16. She broke another girl's jaw in 3 places during a fight. I stood up so fast the plastic chair screeched against the linoleum. Now you listen to me, detective. Are you seriously standing here trying to blame my daughter? My daughter who just watched her father almost get murdered? Mrs. Hood, that was 16 years ago. I cut him off, my voice dangerously low. She was a child. A child. Kids get into fights. It doesn't mean anything. Ma'am, I understand, but no, I said, stepping closer to him. You don't understand. That man, Brandon, is a gambler who stole $95,000 from my family. $95,000 that we worked our entire lives to save. My husband confronted him. My daughter saw him attack my husband. I saw the scratches on Brandon's face, scratches my husband made fighting for his life. What more do you need? Santos held my gaze for a long moment. Then he looked at Elena, who was staring at her hands, her body trembling. The scratches, he said quietly. Yes, we're looking into those. And? I demanded. And we'll be in touch, Mrs. Hood, he said, closing his notebook. I hope your husband recovers. I really do. He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing down the sterile hallway. I sat back down, my heart pounding with anger. How dare he? How dare he try to twist this into something it wasn't? I looked at Elena. She was trembling again, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Mom, she whispered, her voice barely audible. He thinks I did it. No, he doesn't, I said firmly, pulling her back into my arms. He's just a lazy cop looking for an easy answer. Don't you worry, baby, I'm here. I won't let anyone hurt you. I believed her. At that moment, I believed her with every fiber of my being. 2 days later, I was back at Elena's house. The yellow crime scene tape was still stretched across the splintered doorframe like a warning. It felt wrong walking back inside, like trespassing in some sacred space where terrible things had happened. But Thomas was still unconscious in that silent hospital room, and the nurse had said he needed his own things when he woke up. A change of clothes, his reading glasses, his worn leather slippers, small comforts in a world that had suddenly become sharp and cold. I forced myself to walk past the dark stain on the tile floor. I didn't look at it. I couldn't. I just focused on getting upstairs, grabbing what Thomas needed from the guest room, and getting out. As I stepped back outside, my hands full with a small overnight bag, I saw him, Victor Rodriguez. He was sitting on his own porch, just watching me. Not in a creepy way, more like he'd been waiting. He stood up slowly, moving with that careful precision of old injuries, and walked across the small strip of lawn that separated the two properties. "Mrs. Hood," he said, his voice respectful but firm. "Mr. Rodriguez." I nodded, not stopping. I wanted to get back to the hospital. I wanted to sit with Thomas. I didn't have time for this. "I wanted to thank you," I added, pausing by my car, "for what you did, calling the police. You probably saved my husband's life." He just looked at me, his weathered face serious. "Ma'am, I spoke with Detective Santos. He came by yesterday morning." I tensed. "Yes?" "I don't think he believed me," Victor said quietly. "And I have a feeling I need you to believe me." A knot of irritation tightened in my stomach. I was tired. I was grieving. My husband was in a coma. I didn't have the energy for whatever this old man wanted to tell me. "Believe what?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. "What I told the detective, what I heard." Victor took a step closer. "Mrs. Hood, with all due respect, I've lived next door to your daughter and her husband for 3 years. I'm a widower. I'm home most of the time. My windows are often open. I know what I hear." He paused, and something in his eyes made me stop reaching for my car door. "And I need to tell you, ma'am, I spent 20 years in the United States Marine Corps, communications specialist. My hearing is the only part of me that still works perfectly. I can tell you what kind of bird is in that tree just by its call, and I can tell you who does the yelling in that house." I gripped the overnight bag, the handles digging into my palm. "What are you trying to say, Mr. Rodriguez?" "I'm saying," he replied, his voice dropping low, "that in 3 years, I've maybe heard Mr. Mitchell raise his voice twice. Once during a football game, once when he dropped something heavy in the garage." He shook his head slowly. "But your daughter, Mrs. Hood, she screams every week, usually Thursday nights. That's when the bills come, I reckon." My blood went cold. This was wrong. This was the exact opposite of what Elena had told me. "It's always about money," Victor continued. "I hear her—" "Where is it, Brandon? You promised me, Brandon. I can't live like this, Brandon." And he's always the one trying to calm her down. "It's okay, Elena. We'll figure it out. Just calm down, please." He looked at me with something like sympathy. "That's the dynamic, ma'am. That's what I've heard for 3 years. I stared at him, my mind scrambling. This was a lie. It had to be. The detective had said this, and I'd dismissed it. But hearing it from this man, this Marine with his steady voice and certain eyes, it felt different. It felt real. "That night," I said, my voice shaking, "the night my husband was hurt, you told the police—" "I told them exactly what I heard," Victor interrupted, his eyes locking onto mine. "It wasn't the usual Thursday yelling, Mrs. Hood. This was different. This was panic. I was in my yard, right by that fence. I heard your husband's voice first. He sounded upset. He said something like, 'Elena, no. This is madness. You can't do this.' My heart started beating faster. Then I heard the crash, the glass breaking, that lamp, I guess. Then furniture hitting the floor. He took a deep breath like he was bracing himself for what came next. And then, Mrs. Hood. I heard Brandon, and he wasn't calm. He was terrified. He shouted, and I mean shouted, 'Elena, look what you did. You're hurting him.' Then he yelled it again. 'Elena, get away from him.' I couldn't speak. I just stood there, frozen. And then, Victor said, his voice dropping to barely a whisper, I heard him yell, "Give me the phone. I have to call 911." The words hung in the cool afternoon air between us. My mind was spinning. This couldn't be right. This couldn't be. Mrs. Hood, Victor continued. That was maybe 30 seconds before the big fall. I heard the scuffle. Then I heard the sound a body makes when it hits the ground hard, that awful, heavy thud. And the only person I heard screaming, "He pushed him," was your daughter. After it was all over, I must have staggered because Victor reached out to steady me. That's not what Elena said," I whispered, the world tilting beneath my feet. "I know, ma'am," Victor said, and his face was etched with sad, hard pity. "That's why I'm talking to you. I'm just an old soldier. I've seen friendly fire before. I've seen people get confused in the fog of war, but I've also seen people lie to cover their tracks." He looked me square in the eye. "Mrs. Hood, I truly believe you're protecting the wrong person." I drove away from Elena's house, but I couldn't go back to the hospital. Not yet. I couldn't face Thomas while my mind was tearing itself apart. I parked on a quiet side street in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. The overnight bag sat on the passenger seat, mocking me with its simple domestic purpose. Victor's words were poison. They'd seeped into my bloodstream, and now they were working their way toward my heart. "You're protecting the wrong person. It was impossible. It had to be. My daughter was the victim. I'd held her while she sobbed. I'd felt her body shake with grief. My husband was the victim. I'd seen him lying in his own blood. But my mind kept pulling me back. The detective. The juvenile assault record. Victor's absolute certainty. Elena, you're hurting him. Why would Victor lie? What did he have to gain?" And then, like a key turning in a rusty lock, I heard Brandon's voice again. Not the arrogant man I'd despised, but the desperate man being dragged away in handcuffs. Check her laptop. Check Elena's laptop. At the time, I dismissed it as the frantic deflection of a guilty man, a pathetic attempt to shift blame. But what if it wasn't? What if it was the only true thing said that day? I felt sick, physically, bone-deep sick. I was a restaurant owner. I'd built my business from nothing. My entire career had been about reading people, reading customers, reading employees, reading suppliers, knowing who to trust and who would try to cheat you. I'd prided myself on my instincts, on seeing through bullshit. And right now, every instinct I had was screaming that I'd missed something, that I'd been staring at the wrong picture all along. My heart was telling me one thing, but my gut was telling me I was a 58-year-old fool who'd been blind. I couldn't go back to that hospital until I knew. I needed facts. The next morning, I drove downtown to a law office I'd never been to before. I couldn't use our family lawyer, the one who'd handled our wills and business contracts for 20 years. I couldn't risk anyone knowing what I was about to do. I went to someone new, Angela Wu. A colleague from the Restaurant Association had mentioned her name once, said she was a shark in a silk suit, that she didn't deal in sentiment or family feelings. She dealt in assets, fraud, and cold, hard truth. I needed that. I walked into her sharp, modern office feeling like what I was, a grieving, broken woman about to commit an unforgivable betrayal. "Miss Wu," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "My son-in-law was just arrested for attempted murder of my husband. My daughter, Elena, is the primary witness. She's a complete wreck, devastated." I paused, letting the lie settle in the air. With her husband in jail and her father in a coma, she's not capable of handling her own affairs right now. She needs protection. I need you to get a clear picture of her finances, to secure her assets before Brandon's lawyers try to freeze everything. He was a gambler. I need to know how bad the damage is. It was the perfect cover. A concerned mother protecting her traumatized daughter's estate. Angela Wu looked at me with sharp, analytical eyes. She didn't offer sympathy. She didn't waste time. She just nodded once. "I'll need your daughter to sign a power of attorney giving us temporary access to her financial records and devices. She'll sign anything I put in front of her right now," I said, and she did. That afternoon, I brought the papers to Elena at the hospital. She was sitting by Thomas's bed, holding his hand, her eyes red and swollen. "Sweetheart," I said gently, "I brought some paperwork, legal stuff to protect your assets while all this is happening. The lawyer said you need to sign." Elena didn't even read it. She just took the pen with a shaking hand and signed her name. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered, clinging to my hand. "You're the only one I can count on." The words felt like glass shards pushing into my heart. It took Angela Wu less than 24 hours. My phone rang the next morning. It was her. "Christina," she said, "not Mrs. Hood, just my first name. You need to come to my office. Now." The line went dead. I sat in that same stark modern chair. Angela didn't offer coffee. She didn't offer condolences. She simply slid a thick stack of bank statements across her polished glass desk. "You hired me to find out how much damage your daughter's gambler husband did to their finances," she said, her voice flat and emotionless. "You were right about the damage, Christina. You were just wrong about who was holding the hammer." I stared at the papers. My hands were shaking. That tremor that had started the day Thomas fell and never really stopped. The statements showed withdrawals from their joint savings account, dozens of them, 10,000 here, 15,000 there, 5,000, 3,000, all transferred to offshore gambling websites, sites with names like Golden Palace Casino and Diamond Slots Royale. $95,000. Gone over 6 months. This is what he did," I whispered. "No," Angela said. Her voice was like a scalpel. I cross-referenced the timestamps and IP addresses. Every single transfer was made from an IP address registered to your daughter's personal laptop. Brandon Mitchell was verifiably at his office, in documented meetings with time-stamped security logs, during every single one of these transactions. She leaned forward, her eyes merciless. "This wasn't Brandon, Christina. This was Elena." "No," I said. The word came out as a croak. "No, that's not possible. She told me. She told me he was the gambler." "She lied," Angela said simply. "And that's not the only lie, Christina." She spun her laptop around to face me. "You told me your husband went to visit because your daughter had a medical emergency. Severe panic attacks, you said." I nodded, my mouth too dry to speak. "I pulled the records from every hospital and urgent care facility within 50 miles. I checked with her primary care physician and every specialist in the area." Angela's voice was clinical. "Your daughter wasn't treated for panic attacks. She wasn't treated for anything. There was no medical emergency, Christina. She was never a patient." The room tilted. The medical emergency was a lie, a complete fabrication, a cold, calculated trap. "Then why?" I stammered. "Why would she—" "You tell me," Angela said. "Why does a compulsive gambler who just lost $95,000, the exact amount her parents gave her for a down payment, suddenly need her father to visit, alone?" The answer hit me like a fist to the stomach. She was luring him there. She was luring Thomas there to ask for more money. My husband hadn't stumbled into an argument. He'd been summoned to his own execution. "There's more," Angela said, and I watched her pull up an email chain on her screen. "Brandon's last words before they arrested him. He said, 'Check the laptop.' He was right. You should have checked." She turned the screen toward me. It showed an email exchange between Elena and Brandon, dated 1 week before the attack. My vision was swimming. Angela read the words out loud, her voice cutting through my shock like broken glass. From Brandon to Elena. "Elena, I can't do this anymore. I just checked the joint account. It's empty. You promised me you'd stopped. You promised. We're going to lose the house. We're going to lose everything. I can't keep covering for you. I need you to get help." I put my head in my hands. I couldn't breathe. "Scroll down," I managed to say. Angela clicked. Elena's reply appeared. "It's just a setback, Brandon. I can win it back. I know I can. I just need a little more. Your parents have money. Or we can ask my parents. Just don't tell them, please. Please, Brandon, don't tell them. I can fix this. I promise I can fix this." And then the final email, the one that sealed all of our fates. From Brandon. No more lies, Elena. I'm done. I'm done watching you destroy yourself. I'm done covering for you. I'm calling your parents tomorrow. I'm telling them everything. You need real help. And if you won't get it yourself, I'm going to make sure you get it. I love you, but I won't be your accomplice anymore. Angela looked up from the screen. That email was sent at 1:47 p.m. on Tuesday, Christina. Mr. Rodriguez's 911 call came at 4:52 p.m. The same day. She let that sink in. That argument your husband walked into? Brandon wasn't attacking him. He was trying to help him. He was trying to tell the truth. He was trying to save your daughter from herself. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. The entire foundation of my reality had just cracked wide open, and I was falling through it. There's one more thing, Angela said quietly. She pulled out another document. I found this in your husband's personal files, the one stored in his cloud account. It's a copy of his will. Not your joint will, Christina. His separate will, the one for his personal assets. I looked up at her, confused. What are you talking about? We have one will. Everything goes to Elena. We signed it 20 years ago. Angela shook her head. This is a different will, a new one. Created and notarized 8 months ago. She slid it across the desk. I stared at it, my vision blurring. It was Thomas's handwriting on the notes in the margin. I recognized his careful, precise script. Christina, Angela said gently, did you know your husband inherited money? What? No. From who? From his brother, David Hood. He passed away 18 years ago in Seattle. According to these records, he left Thomas his entire estate, $1.4 million. The number meant nothing. It was too big, too absurd. That's impossible, I whispered. Thomas would have told me. We don't have that kind of money. We live in a modest house. We drive a 15-year-old car. He invested it, Angela interrupted. Carefully, quietly. He never touched it. Just let it grow. For 18 years, she pointed to a paragraph in the will. 8 months ago, your husband changed his will. He removed Elena as the beneficiary. Instead, he left the entire amount, now worth approximately $1.6 million, to the National Council on Problem Gambling, a charity focused on addiction recovery and family support. I stared at the words, but they wouldn't come into focus. Thomas had been a millionaire for 18 years, and he never told me. Why? The word came out as a broken whisper. Why would he hide that from me? Angela's expression softened just slightly. I can't answer that, Christina, but I can tell you this. Your daughter found out about it, and I believe that's why your husband is in the hospital. I left Angela Wu's office, but I couldn't move. I just stood on the busy street. The noise of traffic and people washing over me like I was underwater. I'd been wrong. It wasn't a small mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a catastrophic, unforgivable failure of judgment. I, Christina Hood, a woman who'd built a business from nothing, who'd prided herself on reading people, on trusting her instincts, had failed to see the rot in the foundation of my own family. I'd let my disapproval of Brandon blind me. I'd let my protective love for Elena make me deaf to the truth. I thought about Brandon sitting in a jail cell right now. I thought about the scratches on his face, the ones I'd pointed to as proof of his guilt. My God, Thomas must have done that, or Elena had. Brandon had been attacked, and I'd been part of the mob that threw stones at him. He'd been trying to protect my husband. He'd been trying to get help. He was the only one telling the truth, and I, in my arrogant, blind certainty, had helped my daughter lock him away. The shame was so thick I couldn't breathe. My phone buzzed in my pocket, making me jump. It was the hospital. Mrs. Hood? A nurse's voice. Your husband is waking up. He's out of the coma. The doctor thinks you should come right away. I don't remember the drive to the hospital. I don't remember parking or walking through those automatic doors. I just remember my heart pounding so hard I thought it would crack my ribs as I burst into the ICU. When I got to Thomas's room, Elena was already there. She was sitting in the chair pulled close to the bed, her back to the door. She was holding Thomas's hand, stroking his silver hair with her other hand. And Thomas, my Thomas, his eyes were open, just barely. They were clouded with medication, confused, trying to focus on the ceiling. "Papa," Elena was saying, her voice thick and soft. "Papa, you're back. You're awake. Oh, thank God. Thank God." Thomas made a small sound, a faint, dry groan. His eyes, clouded with pain, tried to find the source of the voice. "Shh, it's okay," Elena cooed, squeezing his hand. "You're safe now, Papa. I'm right here. Mom's here too. We're all here. You're safe." I stood frozen in the doorway, watching, and that's when I saw it. Elena leaned in close, so close her hair brushed the pillow. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper, but I heard every word. "We got him, Papa," she whispered. "He can't hurt us anymore. Brandon's in jail. The police took him away. He's gone. You're safe. We're all safe now." I watched those words hit Thomas. I watched my husband, weak, battered, barely conscious, try to process what his daughter had just told him. And I was watching his face. I know Thomas. I've known him for 32 years. I know what he looks like when he's happy, when he's angry, when he's afraid. I was expecting to see relief, peace, a softening. That's not what I saw. As Elena spoke, Thomas's eyes didn't soften. They widened, just a fraction, but I saw it. And I saw the monitor beside his bed, the little green numbers tracking his heart rate. It had been steady, beeping quietly, at 74. When Elena said Brandon's in jail, it jumped. 78, 82, 89. That wasn't relief. That was panic. His gaze shifted, moving past Elena, searching the room frantically. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking for something, someone. He wasn't reacting like a victim who'd just been told his attacker was captured. He was reacting like a hostage who'd just learned his rescuer was gone. And Elena, lost in her own performance, didn't notice. She was too busy playing her part. "It's okay, Papa," she murmured. "Just rest. Everything's okay now. I've got you." I had to get her out of that room. I stepped inside, forcing my voice to sound normal, gentle. "Elena, sweetheart, you look exhausted. You've been here all morning." She looked up, startled. Then she quickly composed her face back into that mask of tear-streaked grief. "Mom, I can't leave him," she said. "You need to eat something," I said. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. "You haven't had a real meal in 2 days. You're no good to him if you collapse. There's a cafeteria downstairs. Go get something hot, a sandwich, coffee, anything. I'll sit with him. I promise I won't leave his side." She hesitated. Her eyes darted from me to Thomas and back. She didn't want to leave. She didn't want to leave him alone with me. Not now. "Go," I said, more force in my voice. "That's an order, Elena. I'll call you if anything changes." She finally stood up, giving Thomas's hand one last squeeze. "I'll be right back, Papa. I love you." She walked past me, and I smelled her perfume, the same one she'd worn since college. The moment the door clicked shut, I moved to the bedside. The room was heavy with the smell of antiseptic and that quiet, steady beep of the heart monitor. I took Thomas's hand. His skin was cold, papery. "Thomas," I whispered, leaning close. "Baby, it's me. It's Christina. You're safe. I'm here." His eyes found mine, and they were filled with desperate, terrifying urgency. "Thomas," I said, my voice shaking, "I need the truth. I know about Elena. I know about the gambling. I saw her laptop. I know Brandon was trying to get help." I squeezed his hand gently. "Just tell me, please, what really happened?" His lips, cracked and dry, began to tremble. A small, strangled sound came out. "It's okay," I said, my heart breaking. "Just whisper. I'm right here. I'm listening." His eyes filled with tears, not performance tears like our daughters, real tears, hot tears of terror. They welled up and spilled over, running down his temples into his hair. "It," he whispered, his voice barely air. "What, Thomas? What was it?" "It was Elena," he breathed. The words were like a punch to my chest. I closed my eyes. I know, baby. I know she lied about the gambling. Was it just about the money? Did she panic? Thomas shook his head. The tiniest movement. But I saw it. It cost him everything. The tears came faster. She found, his voice cracked. Found what, Thomas? His gaze locked on mine. He was using every last ounce of strength he had to push the words out. My will, he whispered. The will. Thomas, I said gently, I know about the money. I know about the inheritance from your brother. I know you changed your will. His eyes closed, a single tear escaping. Why? I asked, the question I'd been carrying since Angela's office. Why didn't you tell me about the money? He took a shaking breath. My father, he whispered. I leaned closer. My father, he said again, each word costing him. Gambler, alcoholic, lost everything. I was so afraid, Christina. Afraid money would poison us. Like it poisoned him. My own tears started then. All these years, Thomas had been carrying his father's ghost, just like Elena had been carrying his. When I saw Elena, he continued, his voice getting weaker, saw the gambling, I knew. I had to stop it, change the will, thought it would force her to get help. And she found it, I said. He nodded, wincing in pain. That day, I whispered, tell me what happened. I confronted her, Thomas said, about the gambling. Brandon was there. He was trying to help, trying to call you. Elena, she found the will in my bag. His breathing got faster. She screamed, said I was stealing her future, demanded I change it. I refused. I told her the money would help people like her. The monitor beeped faster. She attacked me, he whispered, pushed me. Brandon tried to stop her, tried to call 911. Kitchen, knife. I know, I said, squeezing his hand. I know, baby. She attacked Brandon, too. Thomas closed his eyes, exhausted. But I had to know one more thing. Thomas, why did you hide the money from me? I'm your wife. He opened his eyes again, and in them I saw shame, old shame. Didn't want you to see me like my father, he whispered. Didn't want you to be scared of what I could become. And just like that, I understood. Thomas hadn't hidden the money because he didn't trust me. He'd hidden it because he didn't trust himself. He'd been so terrified of becoming his father that he'd locked away his brother's gift like it was cursed. And in a way, it had been. It had become the target, the motive, the reason our daughter had tried to harm him. I love you, I told him, kissing his forehead. We're going to fix this, together. The trial began 2 months later. 2 months of watching Thomas relearn how to walk steadily. 2 months of physical therapy. 2 months of sitting with Brandon in coffee shops and hospital waiting rooms. 3 broken people trying to figure out how to move forward. I'd gotten Brandon released within 48 hours of Thomas waking up. I'd used every dollar Angela Wu demanded. I'd written a statement. I'd stood in front of that judge and said the words, I was wrong. I accused an innocent man. Brandon didn't forgive me right away. He shouldn't have. But he listened, and slowly, carefully, we started to build something that looked like trust. When the trial started, I sat in the front row. Thomas sat beside me, still using a cane, but determined to be there. Across the aisle, Brandon sat alone, wearing a simple dark suit. Elena's lawyer was slick, expensive. He painted a picture of a dysfunctional family, of controlling parents and an abusive husband. He described Thomas as a secretive man who'd hidden a fortune. He described me as a prejudiced mother-in-law who'd never accepted her son-in-law. He described Brandon as a gambling addict who'd isolated Elena. I felt the jury's eyes on me. I gripped Thomas's hand, but then came Victor Rodriguez. The old Marine walked to that witness stand like he was walking into battle. Calm, certain, unshakable. He told them what he'd heard, every word, every scream, every desperate plea. And then he said something that changed everything. "I have a security camera," Victor said. "Motion activated, mounted on my porch. It's aimed at my driveway." Elena's lawyer jumped up. "Objection. This wasn't disclosed." "It was," the prosecutor said calmly, holding up a document. "Item 34B, digital media provided by V. Rodriguez. It was in the evidence log 4 months ago. Defense never reviewed it." The judge wasn't amused. "Overruled. Continue, Mr. Rodriguez." Victor nodded. "My camera points at my driveway. But there's this big bay window on your daughter's house, Mrs. Hood. During the day, it just reflects sky. But at night, when the lights are on inside, it becomes a mirror." The courtroom went silent. "And my camera," Victor said, "caught everything." They played the video. It was grainy, black and white. The angle was strange, warped by the curve of the window glass, but it was clear. I watched Elena attack Thomas. I watched her push him with both hands. I watched Brandon try to help. I watched Elena go to the kitchen and come back with something silver in her hand. I watched her attack Brandon when he tried to call for help. The jury watched it twice. Elena's mask cracked in that courtroom. She lunged at me, screaming about her money, about betrayal. The verdict came back in less than an hour. Guilty. 18 years. 6 months later, we were sitting in a church basement at a support group meeting for families affected by gambling addiction. Thomas walked with his cane now, slow but steady. Brandon sat beside him, not as a son-in-law anymore, but as a son. A young woman stood up to speak. She talked about losing everything to online casinos, about stealing from her parents, about the program that saved her life, a program funded by the Hood Mitchell's Recovery Foundation. That's what we'd named it. Thomas's inheritance, the money Elena had tried to harm for, was now saving people just like her. The poison had become medicine. After the meeting, the young woman approached us. "You're the Hood Mitchells," she said, her eyes wet. "Thank you. You gave me my kids back. You gave them their mother." Brandon just nodded, his throat too tight to speak. We drove home together, the 3 of us. Thomas dozed in the passenger seat. Brandon looked out the window. When we pulled into the driveway of our small house, I turned off the engine. "We're home," I said softly. And we were. The letter from Elena arrived a week later, angry, threatening, blaming everyone but herself. I read it once. Then I walked to the fireplace where Thomas and Brandon were sitting. "She hasn't learned anything," I said quietly. "No," Thomas agreed. "She hasn't." I held the letter over the flames. "She can't hurt us anymore," I said, and I let it go. We watched it burn together, watched her threats turn to ash and smoke. She'd spent 18 years carrying her grandfather's curse, and now she'd spend 18 more locked away, still refusing to see the truth. But us? We'd built something new, something real, not a family born from blood, but forged in fire and truth. Thomas reached for my hand. Brandon put his hand on Thomas's shoulder, and we sat there in our small living room, finally at peace. So here's what I learned from this nightmare. Secrets, even well-intentioned ones, can become weapons. Prejudice can blind you to the truth standing right in front of you. And family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who stands beside you when everything falls apart. I'd spent 4 years hating the wrong person, 4 years protecting a monster because she had my eyes, 4 years letting my own biases make me deaf and blind. Brandon wasn't the enemy. He was the one trying to save us all. And the hardest truth? I'd helped put him in jail. I'd stood by while an innocent man suffered. That's something I'll carry for the rest of my life. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It's also a foundation. You can build something new there, something stronger. We did. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been completely wrong about someone? Have you ever realized you were protecting the wrong person? Have you ever let your prejudices blind you to the truth? Drop your story in the comments below. Tell me where you're watching from. And if this story taught you something, If it made you think twice about the assumptions you make, hit that like button and subscribe. Because the truth is uncomfortable. The truth forces us to look at our own failures, but the truth is also the only thing that sets us free. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, someone who's dealing with addiction in their family, someone who's being falsely accused, someone who's protecting the wrong person, share this video with them. Sometimes the people we should trust least are the ones we love most. And sometimes the people we should trust most are the ones we've spent years pushing away. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.